"Help! My husband! They took my husband!" The scream echoed through the early morning mist along Oregon's Sandy River. Drivers on a lonely road near Oxbow Park stopped to a shocking sight. 56-year-old Hazelyn, Lynn Stomps, drenched and battered, crawling up from the riverbank with a broken pelvis and desperation in her eyes. She told an unbelievable story, a story of a peaceful fishing trip turned deadly ambush, of two mysterious men and a Craigslist deal gone horrifyingly wrong. Lynn claimed that as dawn broke on February 6, 2009, she and her husband Jerry met up with a prospective buyer for their boat at the river's edge, only to be attacked without warning. One assailant, she said, chased 60-year-old Gerald, Jerry Stomps, into the woods, while the other grabbed her and hurled her off a high bridge into the freezing waters below. Bruised and shaking with pain, Lynn gasped that she had spent nearly 2 hours dragging her broken body out of the river gorge inch by inch until a passing motorist finally spotted her and called 911. Her husband was now missing. The nightmare had only begun. Welcome to Unexpected Twists. Here, even the most seemingly simple story is worth a top-tier Hollywood adaptation, so stick around till the end and subscribe. Let's go back a little bit to understand exactly how we ended up here. Our focus in this story is on Jerry and Lynn Stomps, who lived in a town called Corbett, Oregon, with a modest population of a few thousand people. By 2009, both were nearing 60 and had been married for almost 4 decades. Jerry and Lynn first crossed paths in 1969 when they were both quite young. They were complete opposites. Lynn was warm and gentle, whereas Jerry was more direct and blunt, never afraid to speak his mind. 2 years after meeting, in 1971, they got married almost as soon as Jerry returned from serving in Vietnam. Neither Jerry nor Lynn ever chased after high-powered careers or riches. Instead, they preferred a modest lifestyle within their means, not looking to buy what they couldn't afford. Jerry especially had a strong dislike for banks and refused to take on any loans or credit. While they didn't have a vast amount of money, they always managed to get by. In 1973, the couple welcomed their first son, Jason. 3 years later came Adam. Friends of the Stomps family described Jerry and Lynn as attentive, caring parents. By all accounts, the family was tight-knit and both boys enjoyed a happy upbringing. As the years went by, Jason and Adam each started families, making Jerry and Lynn grandparents for the first time in 2004. By the time our story unfolds in 2009, they were fully retired and spending most of their time with their 4 grandchildren. That was exactly when an unthinkable tragedy struck, one that nobody could have foreseen. As we already know, Lynn's husband is missing, and she herself was severely injured, but most importantly, she was alive. Within hours, a massive search and rescue operation was underway along the Sandy River at Oxbow Regional Park, combing for any sign of Jerry. Searchers scoured the thick brush and frigid waters where Lynn said her husband had been chased. Police dogs sniffed along the riverbanks and helicopters whirred overhead. On the surface, it looked like a tragic case of a random attack, a Vietnam veteran and outdoorsman vanishing during what should have been a simple morning of fishing, his wife left grievously injured and alone. Friends, family, and volunteers held their breath, praying Jerry might somehow be found alive. But as days passed, no trace of Jerry turned up. No footprints, no dropped tackle box or clothing, none of the usual evidence one might expect after a struggle in the woods. The story Lynn told was horrifying, yet something about it felt off to the investigators. She was rushed to the hospital with serious injuries, including a shattered pelvis, broken rib, and internal bruising consistent with a hard fall. In her hospital bed, Lynn repeated her story to the police through waves of pain. She explained that a man named Dave had contacted Jerry about buying their fishing boat after seeing Jerry's Craigslist ad. The plan was to meet up early that Friday to demonstrate the boat and hopefully close a sale before doing a bit of fishing together. According to Lynn, when they arrived at the remote riverside spot, 2 men appeared. Dave and an accomplice. Without warning, an argument erupted. One man suddenly pulled out a handgun. Lynn described how Jerry shouted for her to run as the stranger raised the weapon. In a frenzy, one attacker took off after Jerry, who ran down a wooded path towards the Sandy River, while the other man grabbed Lynn. She remembered the cold terror as rough hands pushed her over the railing of the Gordon Creek Bridge. 20 feet she plummeted, slamming onto the rocky shore below. The last thing Lynn claimed she saw before blacking out was her beloved husband being chased into the trees at gunpoint. It was a nightmarish tale. 2 murderous assailants on the loose, a husband kidnapped, and a wife left for dead. With Jerry missing and possibly in danger, time was critical. Police issued alerts with the descriptions Lynn provided of the 2 men. Sketch artists stood by as Lynn shakily recalled any features of Dave and his partner. Meanwhile, search teams intensified their efforts along the river, fearing Jerry might have been shot or drowned. The Sandy River's currents were swift and unforgiving. If Jerry had been dumped there, every passing hour made recovery less likely. Scuba divers probed the depths while deputies canvassed nearby trails for any disturbed foliage or blood. But nothing surfaced. Not a drop of blood on the bridge, not a single piece of torn clothing, or any sign of a struggle on the path where Jerry supposedly fled. It was as if Jerry Stomps had evaporated into the crisp winter air. As investigators broadened the search area, some began to quietly question Lynn's story. The more they combed the supposed crime scene, the stranger things became. A local man who had been walking near the trails that morning told police he saw no footprints or broken branches along the route where Jerry was allegedly chased. Given the damp February soil, anyone running or being dragged should have left tracks, yet the ground appeared undisturbed. Moreover, no witnesses apart from Lynn reported seeing any unfamiliar men or vehicles in the area around dawn. The park gates hadn't even opened to the public yet that early in the morning. Detectives double-checked every detail Lynn provided. She insisted the meeting with Dave had been arranged via Craigslist email, but when officers accessed the email account Jerry used for the ad, they found 0 responses or evidence that any serious buyer had ever actually set up a meeting. The supposed boat sale prospect simply didn't exist on record. Then came another puzzling discovery. Jerry Stomps hadn't been seen by anyone except Lynn for nearly a week before his disappearance. Friends and neighbors told investigators that the last time they had spoken to or seen Jerry was back on January 30th, 2009, a full 7 days before the alleged river ambush. Lynn had never mentioned any such gap. In fact, she had supplied police a list of people Jerry supposedly saw or spoke with in the days leading up to February 6, painting a picture of normal life. Errands run, phone calls, chores. But when police followed up, those people either hadn't seen Jerry at those times or didn't exist at all. None of Lynn's timelines checked out. It was as if she had been constructing Jerry's alibi for the week. This revelation sent a chill through the investigative team. Could it be that Jerry hadn't gone missing on February 6th at Oxbow Park, as Lynn claimed, because something had already happened to him days earlier? Despite these red flags, authorities tread carefully. Lynn was still recuperating from major injuries, and they needed more than gut feeling to confront a woman who, for now, was the only witness to what was still officially a missing persons case. So investigators did something crucial. They widened the investigation beyond the river. While searching crews continued to sweep the Sandy River area, a separate team turned their attention to the Stomps' own house and property in rural Corbett. Standard procedure in such cases is to check the house for any signs that Jerry returned or for clues to where he might have gone. On the evening of February 6th, as dusk fell, detectives secured permission to examine the Stomps' cozy farmhouse and the surrounding 14-acre property, a spread that included a Christmas tree farm the couple operated. Flashlights in hand, investigators crept through the shadowy property, not sure what they might find. Perhaps Jerry made it home somehow after the attack. Perhaps he left some sign or message. Behind the Stomps' house, past a garden and under a stand of fir trees, one detective noticed something odd. A section of soil in a fire pit looked disturbed, as if it had been recently shoveled. Nearby, there were charred piles of debris and ash, including what looked like remains of burned garbage cans and even animal carcasses from the farm. Amid the cinders, a glint of white caught the detective's eye. He bent down and carefully picked up a small fragment. His blood ran cold. It appeared to be a bone, a fragment of a jawbone with a couple of human teeth still attached. As more officers were called over, they sifted through the ashy piles and uncovered additional tiny bone fragments, burned nearly beyond recognition. There in the backyard, concealed in what looked like the remnants of a bonfire, lay the answer to the mystery. Jerry Stomps had never left his own property alive. The search for a missing person instantly transformed into a homicide investigation. Forensic teams descended on the Stomps property with a new urgency. Floodlights turned night into day as investigators painstakingly collected the charred bone pieces, bits of what appeared to be human vertebrae and even teeth. Over the next day, these remnants were analyzed, and through dental records and DNA testing, they were positively identified as Jerry's. Shockingly, only about 10% of his skeleton was recovered. The rest had been reduced to ash. It appeared someone had tried very hard to erase Jerry from existence. Detectives also made a chilling find amid the debris, signs that Jerry's body had been dismembered before burning. The bone fragments were small and often mixed with those of animals, suggesting a meticulous effort to dispose of the corpse in pieces alongside regular farm waste. This was no impromptu crime of passion at the river. It was a methodical cover-up. Inside the Stomps residence, the evidence mounted further. Police discovered Jerry's favorite handgun, a .22 caliber revolver, tucked away in a drawer. Jerry was known to carry it for protection on remote fishing trips, but forensic analysis showed this gun had been fired twice recently, and ominously, it had traces of Jerry's blood on the muzzle and even inside the barrel. Such blood spattered deep in the barrel indicated that the gun was pressed right up against Jerry when it was fired, likely into the head, causing blowback of blood into the firearm. It was now evidence how Jerry died. He had been shot at least once at point-blank range, probably while still at home, and certainly not by any mysterious river marauder. The house itself yielded more clues. There was faint bloodstains detected by luminol in the bed of Jerry's pickup truck and on the floor of a barn. Investigators theorized that after shooting Jerry, the perpetrator transported his body using that truck bed out to the burn pile area. It was a stark contrast to the violent struggle with strangers that Lynn had described. All signs pointed to the unthinkable. Lynn Stomps had murdered her husband. As the forensic net closed around her, Hazelyn Lynn Stomps went from victim to suspect. Detectives confronted her with the evidence, the blood in the house, the brutal remains in the yard, the non-existent boat buyer. Lynn's reaction was telling. Despite the mountain of proof, she stuck to her story, insisting that she and Jerry were attacked by outsiders. But the facade was crumbling. On February 12, 2009, just 1 week after Lynn's dramatic rescue, police arrested her at the hospital on suspicion of murder. She was actually wheeled out of her hospital room and taken into custody, still recovering from her pelvic fracture. It was a surreal scene. The same woman who had been sobbing in pain and fear days earlier was now being read her Miranda rights for the murder of her own spouse. Investigators charged Lynn with first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and filing a false police report. Allegations that just days prior would have seemed absurd. How could this kind, soft-spoken woman, a mother of two, married to Jerry for 39 years, possibly be capable of such a cold-blooded act? The answer would emerge in the next weeks and months to follow, as detectives dug into the Stomps' past and Lynn's possible motives. The portrait of Lynn Stomps that emerged was a far cry from the loving wife she had appeared to be. Behind closed doors, the Stomps' marriage was in deep trouble. Friends revealed that Jerry had been quietly considering divorce after nearly 4 decades of marriage. The couple's relationship had frayed, reportedly due to frequent arguments and Jerry's suspicion that Lynn was hiding things from him. That suspicion was well founded. Investigators discovered that Lynn had racked up tens of thousands of dollars in debt on secret credit cards and was desperate to keep it hidden. The financial stress and fear of losing her comfortable life in a divorce may have pushed Lynn to a breaking point. If Jerry divorced her, Lynn risked losing their home, the farm, and financial security, not to mention facing Jerry's wrath over her clandestine debts. It appeared she began plotting a way out. If Jerry disappeared, dead men tell no tales. Perhaps she could claim his life insurance, or at least avoid the fallout of divorce. The scheme Lynn concocted was diabolical in its detail. Prosecutors later outlined how sometime in late January 2009, likely on or around January 31st, Lynn put her plan into action. She took Jerry's own pistol and shot him twice, including a fatal shot to the head. It may have happened as Jerry slept, or perhaps she lured him into an ambush in the barn. We may never know the exact moment of confrontation. What is clear is that Lynn then faced the task of disposing of her husband's body and creating a cover-up story. The dismemberment of Jerry's remains was a calculated choice. A whole corpse would be difficult to burn completely, but smaller parts would be incinerated more thoroughly. Over the next several days, as January rolled into February, Lynn methodically burned Jerry's body in the backyard. She mingled his remains with trash and animal carcasses from their farm, hoping to destroy evidence and make any leftover bits seem like just another dead animal from the farm. She was wiping out the physical existence of the man she'd lived with for 40 years. Lynn's plan didn't end with eliminating Jerry. She needed a story for when he was suddenly gone. Here, her years of living in rural Oregon gave her a blueprint. Everyone knew Jerry loved fishing, and Oxbow Park by the Sandy River was one of his favorite spots. If Jerry simply vanished during an outing there, it could be written off as an accident. Perhaps a drowning in the swift river currents, or a tragic encounter with foul play by unknown assailants. Lynn went so far as to place a Craigslist ad for the boat herself to bolster the lie that a potential buyer was coming. She likely intended to leave Jerry's truck and some fishing gear by the water to make it look like he went fishing and never came home. Indeed, investigators found that on February 5th, the day before she summoned help, Lynn drove Jerry's pickup truck across the Columbia River into Washington State and back. Surveillance cameras caught her behind the wheel, ostensibly running a farm errand. The Stomps kept some livestock on a property in Klickitat, Washington, and Jerry would often drive out there. By making that trip herself, Lynn maintained the appearance that Jerry was still alive and handling chores in the days nobody saw him. She was meticulously staging the scene for Jerry's disappearance. Everything might have gone according to Lynn's perfect plan, if not for one twist of fate. In the pre-dawn hours of February 6th, Lynn drove Jerry's truck to the Gordon Creek Bridge near Oxbow Park to plant it as evidence. The ground was slick with winter frost, and the darkness impenetrable. Lynn parked the truck at the bridge, likely intending to hike out of the area unseen after setting the scene. But as she moved onto the bridge, perhaps trying to toss some of Jerry's belongings into the river below, Lynn slipped and fell. The drop was severe. In an ironic turn, the fall that Lynn claimed was caused by attackers actually happened by her own misstep, and it shattered her pelvis, incapacitating her. In that agonizing moment, all of Lynn's careful planning began to unravel. She was supposed to be able to simply leave the truck and vanish, letting the world think Jerry went missing while fishing on his own. Instead, she found herself crumpled under the very bridge where she meant to stage his disappearance. As dawn broke, Lynn realized she was trapped by her injury. She now had to improvise an explanation for why she, too, was out there at the crack of dawn, something her original plan hadn't accounted for. She almost got away with murder. Multnomah County Deputy District Attorney Annie Schoen would later tell a jury. But at the very last minute, something went horribly wrong with her perfect plan, and it ruined everything. In January 2011, 2 years after Jerry's death, Lynn Stomps finally went on trial for murder. In a surprising move, Lynn's defense team conceded Jerry was dead by her hand, but they floated an alternative scenario. They suggested perhaps Jerry's death had been the result of a domestic dispute, heat of passion incident. Maybe they implied an argument escalated and Lynn shot him impulsively, then lied out of fear. But the jury didn't buy it. The lengths to which Lynn had gone told a different story, one of planning and deception, rather than a sudden loss of control. After a gripping trial, the jury delivered a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder. Lynn Stomps, at 57 years old, was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 25 years. As the judge prepared to hand down the sentence, members of Jerry's family confronted Lynn in the courtroom. Jerry and Lynn's 2 sons had lost their father at their mother's hands, an almost unfathomable betrayal. Jerry's youngest son, Adam, spoke with raw emotion, addressing his mother, now a convicted murderer, directly. "You took someone I loved very much, and you stole him away with an act so violent and evil I can't even say the words." He seethed, voice trembling. "I hope you burn in hell." Not once during the trial had Lynn ever admitted the truth or expressed real remorse for what she'd done. Adam's final words cut through the courtroom. "You have not shown a shred of remorse. You are a monster." There was not a dry eye in the house as the family's pain spilled out. Lynn sat stone-faced, offering no apology. The gavel came down, and she was led away in handcuffs, destined to spend likely the rest of her life in a prison cell. If you enjoy such cases with unexpected twists, check out the channel. There you're going to find many great stories. If you like what you see, please subscribe. I'd be very grateful. I'll catch you next time.